Hi, welcome to our presentation, PBL Part 2. This presentation was done by myself, Rohail Ansari, Rohan Sharma, Kunal Kumar, and Salman Majid.
The workplace setting that we have chosen to apply our concepts for PBL assignment 2 is Canada's Wonderland. And a more generic topic would be, something like an amusement park or a theme park. Canada's Wonderland employs up to 40,000 employees over a season, and those employees have different ages, different backgrounds. It's very diverse. We believe that this is the perfect setting to investigate workplace learning and the effects it has on the employee and the employer. Now, to continue with the approaches taken towards return on investment by Canada's Wonderland, number one concept is training. Everybody that gets hired goes through intense training where they go over WMIS, customer interaction training, something that teaches employees on how to interact with customers. For example, putting the customer first or not letting your own personal problems, stop you from providing that smile to the customer. Training on rides for ride operators. It's important for ride operators to know all the emergency things to lean on, every button for what ride, emergency stops for a ride, and things like that can only be learned when they're trained on being a ride operator. They're also Employees are also help to go over company policies and expectations as far as showing up late to work or how many times you're allowed to call in sick. So all those policies and expectations that could impact the performance by an employee are communicated to them throughout their training. Another thing, certain positions at Wonderland or any amusement park would require an employee to have a first aid or some sort of a CPR level C training, which allows them to obviously save somebody's life if they need to. I know lifeguards that work at Canada's Wonderland that are required to have this first aid CPR training, and annually they're tested on the information and all on the skills that they have. And at the end of the day, there's always weekly audits that occur for employees. Again, these audits can be used to fix the things that haven't been fixed, and it gives an employee a good background on how their performance is so far. Moving on to the rationale or the reasoning behind why Canada's Wonderland or any amusement park uses training as one of their top concepts to calculate return on investment are as follows. Number one, customer satisfaction, which is the primary thing for almost every business. When I talk about customer satisfaction, I'm referring to things like employees getting trained to do seat checks faster than they would if they have never done it before, which would speed up the lineup at Wonderland or in any amusement park, which would want a guest to come back because they would be so happy the fact that they were able to get on a ride so fast. It prevents workplace injuries and accidents. If an employee during training is made aware of the things that could happen and the things that they could do to ensure that the accidents or that nobody gets hurt, a lot of incidents get prevented that way than them not having any idea about something like that occurring. And as I said earlier, faster lineup for rides always means that people are going to want to come back. Guests are going to want to go back on slides that they spent the least amount of time waiting for. And it just makes everybody happy. If it's a really hot day and people are waiting outside in lines and employees are trained to speak to guests, to provide the customer service and to move lineups faster, it makes everybody happy. It makes the management happy, and most importantly, it makes all the guests at the park happy. Now we want to go over some of the issues and challenges that are, faced by an employer. With when we look at things from their perspective, it's a lot different than looking at a perspective from an employee. So one of the biggest issues and challenges that an employer, has to go through or an employer thinks about is the ability to successfully communicate information to any new batch, to a new employee, to a new training session. There's always information that you put on the slides. Hopefully, people understand, but are they successfully understanding the information has always been an issue and a challenge for an employer, because it's crucial that they understand what they're doing instead of not understanding what they're doing and then making a mistake, which it takes more time to deal with and possibly more money to deal with. That's something that everybody wants to avoid. Another thing, there's no minimum mark requirement to pass the training. As far as you attend the training and do a few tests, and as long as you pass them, you're hired, and that's it. Now, somebody could take some guesses. Somebody could, ask somebody else for help. But when it comes time to deal with something in real life, they might not be prepared just because there was no set standard of information that the company had set for employees for them to go into the work field. Another thing, failure to use social media as an advantage. As mentioned later on in the PowerPoint, some of the technologies that they used were, just very basic, and there was no interaction or engagement between employees. There was no uh, connection after work. Something that made people want to come back to work. So that's something that employers have always had an issue with. Something that brought all the employees together. And another thing, failure to act upon a certain report or an incident. So if an employee was to bring up an incident or a concern, or even if an employee were to fill up a report regarding really anything, and if the management fails to deal with it or to attend to it, it could lead to something else later on that could have been prevented. And so that's another thing that management wants to ensure, that their supervisors or their assistant supervisors are taken care of, and they're actually acting upon anything that's reported, so it can be either prevented from happening later on, or that it can be improved so that everybody is happy. Now that we've talked about some of the issues and challenges that are faced by an employer, I'd like to shed some light on some of the challenges that an employee might have to face. Not necessarily face, or something that they might bring upon themselves. Number one, an inconsistency in performance. So, as stated in the PowerPoint, there's weekly audits that happen for employers to ensure that employees are actually using the training and benefiting from it. When the audits are happening, an employee might not be at their best behavior, or there might be something going on in their lives. There might be, anything could result in in them not performing to the best as they maybe do for the rest of the week. So a weekly audit might happen on a Sunday, and an employee's having a great day from Monday to Saturday, amazing customer service, but guess what? He doesn't get audited. But on one day that he found out that he failed his exam and he failed this assignment, he's not that happy at work and he gets audited. It's not really a true reflection of the employee. And I guess this could also be an issue and challenge faced by an employer, but it kind of goes hand in hand, because the employee is at the end of the day responsible for having the same results, having and putting the same amount of energy every day. Another thing, lack of commitment towards understanding the information that's provided in training. A lot of employees might, when they're going through training, might not pay attention, might be thinking about other things. So the fact that they're not committed enough to understand every little concept that's taught to them might be an issue and challenge, it could be an issue. It's already an issue that they haven't learned it, but it could become a challenge when they have to face a situation in real life and they wouldn't know how to deal with it. Asking for help when needed. A lot of employees might assume that I'm supposed to know this information, so they might end up guessing what to do. Now, that guess might be something wrong, that guess might be right. It's left up to chances, and if you're wrong, it's something that is going to backfire on you, and it's going to be on your record. Um, Another thing would be a failure to report an incident, and if an employee sees something go wrong and a customer get treated wrong, or anything wrong that could be fixed, something that could prevent it from happening. Um, the failure to report it, or just not caring enough to report it, is also another issue. But employees, if they're trained properly, if they pay attention during training, and if they are actually committed to understanding the information, it's something that could be prevented. And every incident is a chance to improve. Everything that happens is something that um, it should encourage management to change and make improvements for the future. To continue with some of the results and the success that the training brings to any amusement park, and specifically Canada's Wonderland, from an employer's perspective and from an employee's perspective. From an employer's perspective, things get a lot cost efficient. If I'm training my employees to take care to prevent accidents from happening, that means I do not have to uh, spend time in reporting those accidents, spend money in fixing those accidents, and nobody gets hurt. Another thing that an employer looks at as a success as far as training is concerned is customer satisfaction. As I've mentioned before, if a customer is satisfied, they're going to come back. And when they come back, it's good for the business. And if the business is good, management's happy. From an employee's perspective, obviously it speeds up process a lot more. They become so strong with the skills that they use every day. They're able to adapt to any situations that are thrown at them. Another thing, employees are able to prevent accidents. As I mentioned before, for an employer, as it can be cost efficient, for an employee, it's more important for them to be safe. Safety is the number one thing that any amusement park should, enforce, and Canada's Wonderland does that very well. So going over WMIS, going over possible accidents at work, employees can actually prevent that from happening. Now, there's also, as I mentioned, lifeguards, security guards, and certain positions at Wonderland that require first aid, level C CPR, and it's kind of beneficial to everybody that's in the park, because in case of an emergency, there are licensed individuals that can help. And future preparation, this goes a little bit both for an employer and employee, because an employer can prepare based on the events that happen. Today they can prepare better in the future. And for as far as an employee is concerned, the amount of work experience or any skill that I learned from working or dealing with situations, I can use later on in my life to move on. So it's something that should be a learning experience no matter where you're working. And I believe Canada Wonderland provides that for many employees, and that way an employee and an employer are pretty much allowed to grow together instead of growing separately. Now to move on to some of the technologies that are used in the training process. um, as as surprising as this may sound, there isn't much that's used as far as technology is concerned. Basic things like a projector screen, computers for people to write down information, fill out forms. For auditing purposes, I know people that audit use iPads. Um, and some very limited social media, and that's only because, not because the management encourages it. It's because the employees themselves feel like it's easier for them to communicate, so that's the only social media use that happens. But it's definitely not from the management side, it's definitely not from the employer side. So as far as myself and my group is concerned, we really hope that Canada's Wonderland had more use as far as they could, as far as technology was concerned, because of the era that we live in, the time that we live in. A lot of people are always on technology, and if we can use that to our advantage for people to learn and for people to be more prepared for situations, why not? Now I'd like to go over some of the benefits of the fact that there is a lack of use of technology at Canada's Wonderland. The number one thing is simplicity and the fact that the information and the PowerPoint slides and the presentation is very generic. So no matter what type of a background you have, no matter what kind of beliefs you have, or no matter what age, gender, or anything, any type of difference you have, you'll be easily able to understand the information that's given to you. Presentations, PowerPoint slides. If somebody's actually trying to make an effort and they're not so good at being able to adapt other technologies, this is perfect because it's so simple and it'll benefit them no matter what. Because those are the kind of people that ask questions and that want to improve. Another benefit is the fact that it's so easily available. Now, if I have to give a PowerPoint presentation, and if I'm a huge corporation, I'm Canada's Wonderland, I wouldn't need to hire people, especially to train, because a lot of people know how to use PowerPoint. A lot of people know how to use PowerPoint to present well. Now, the fact that there's a lot of people that can do that, it makes it easily available to new employees. I know Wonderland used to have about 3 to 4 training sessions almost for 5 to 6 straight weeks. And why is that? Because they didn't have to spend any extra money or time towards hiring people that could train the new employees. Now, some of the challenges that are faced because of the lack of technology, number one is the failure to learn from technology. Now, if somebody's getting trained to be at a photo booth, but during their training process, they're sitting in a room and looking at PowerPoint slides, when they actually go in the work field, they won't be able to perform at their highest level because they never got hands-on training. Moving on, as I said, lack of hands-on training as far as being at a photo booth or even as simple as changing a garbage. Some people don't even know how to change garbage, and if you're not trained to do that, or if nobody has shown you how to do that, you're not going to be able to do that right. A part of the reason behind why that happens is because during training there's a lot of point and click activities, which means you're given the thing and you have pretty much 1 to 2 or 3 answers to choose from, and it's a pretty obvious answer that you're going to choose from. Therefore, you did great in training and you move on. But are you really ready for the workplace? Most of the times people are, but there's always cases that aren't ready and then they just get by the training. Those are the flaws that the management wants to fix. That's one of the challenges that the Canada's Wonderland or any business tries to focus on. And also, as I mentioned earlier, lack of social engagement and guest interaction skills. If somebody comes in for an interview, they might be great. They might sound great. They might have the perfect answers. But if they've never had an interaction with a guest or an interaction with an angry guest, they might not be ready to deal with the situation if they're put into a workplace environment where a guest is yelling at them, a guest is swearing at them, and if they don't have the right training and the right tools, they might just deal with the situation completely wrong, and that'll result in more disciplinary actions, and that just takes away more time from the management that they could have spent doing something else. To understand a workplace like Canada's Wonderland or an amusement theme park where so many employees and so many situations can happen, it's important to understand the social critic and the people around the concept of workplace learning and what they have to say about it. The number one thing that's always brought up is the failure to use up to date software. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the training is still happening through PowerPoint slides and presentations, and there isn't much of a variety for people that learn in different ways, or for people that need more of a hands-on training. There could also be an improvement as far as team building exercises is concerned. Employees may feel that their company has left them to learn things on their own if there's no follow-ups after training on their performances. Although there are weekly audits that occur weekly, um, only the employees that need the discipline are contacted. But what about the employees that are working efficiently? They do not get the recognition that they deserve, because a lot of the time of the management is spent upon correcting and disciplining the employees that have performed poorly or made mistakes or have complaints against. Employees are often just left to figure things out on their own while on duty, and if there's no supervisors or management around, they might make wrong decisions, and this is not something that we can blame them solely for. it's also management's fault that they failed to train their employees on situations that could have been prevented. Instead of focusing more on disciplinary actions towards employees that show room for improvement, focus should be to figure out how to make training more effective. So, because Wonderland does, or any amusement park does this almost every year, not almost every year, actually, it happens every year, they should be aware of a set of trends that employees tend to follow. A certain amount of mistakes that they might make should be prevented. Certain amount of the decisions that they make should be communicated to the employee to make sure in certain situations don't do things like this. And the inability of an organization to use criticism to improve is a huge thing. If you're criticized upon a concept or an idea, and if an organization just decides to look over it or not attend to it, it's some is can be very harmful for the organization, as it would just add on more time they would have to spend on the incident if it was to happen again, or more money if something like this will happen again, if somebody gets hurt that they could have prevented, um, only if they took in somebody else's criticism, it doesn't look that good on the company.
Here are the references.